Zhou Wen felt exhausted as though he had been sucked dry. The color in his face instantly drained as beads of sweat oozed out of his forehead. In-game, the companion egg's red stream of light brightened after it absorbed the primordial energy, dyeing the entire companion egg red, making it look like a blood crystal. Crack. It cracked open and a blood-colored Vigor Ant's light projection flashed and entered the blood-colored avatar's body. At this moment, Zhou Wen felt an odd force surge into his body. It was as though the force had a life of its own. Although it was indescribable, it was transmitting information to Zhou Wen in a magical manner. Pledge my life to follow you. Pledge my life to follow you. Pledge my life to follow you. As the voices sounded in Zhou Wen's mind, the force in him gathered towards the back of his left hand. Slowly it formed a blood-colored ant symbol like a tattoo made from blood. Zhou Wen subconsciously pulled his sleeves down and shrank his left hand in to prevent others from seeing the ant symbol on the back of it. Companion beasts had an extremely mystical existence. They were like parasites that live on humans, living and dying with their masters. Zhou Wen took a look at the in-game information. Indeed, there was an additional entry of mutated Vigor Ant at Companion Beast. Then, he took another look at the mutated Vigor Ant stats. Mutated Vigor Ant Mortal. Strength, 9. Speed, 5. Constitution, 9. Primordial Energy, 9. Talent Skill, Vigor Divine Fist, rank 9. Companion Form, Boxing Glove. Zhou Wen was delighted seeing this. A mutated Vigor Ant stats could match a top mortal stage human and it had a rank 9 Vigor Divine Fist. If he summoned it out, it was equivalent to having another hatchet man as strong as him. It could even be more ferocious than Zhou Wen since his Vigor Divine Fist was rank 7 while it was at rank 9. Zhou Wen was eager to immediately summon the mutated Vigor Ant to see what it looked like in real life since all he saw in-game was a mutated Vigor Ant drawn in a cartoon style. He had no idea what it really looked like. However, with him being in school, Zhou Wen could only resist his desire. A mortal stage companion beast would probably attract plenty of attention if he summoned it in school. Furthermore, Zhou Wen didn't have any good explanation for the mutated Vigor Ant's origins. Tian Xingdong couldn't help but sneakily size up Zhou Wen. Upon seeing him, he said in a depressed tone, "Look at Zhou Wen. He's gaming until he's pale and breaking out into a cold sweat. He looks so frail. If I hadn't seen his strength and primordial energy skill with my own eyes, I would really think that he was a sickly fellow." Little did he know that the reason for Zhou Wen's sickly look was because he had been using his blood to revive himself in-game over the past month. Although 1 drop of blood each time wasn't a lot, the numerous times he did so still caused him to lose a shocking amount of blood. This made Zhou Wen look somewhat pale and weak as though he was malnourished or suffering from anemia. This was also one of the reasons why Yu Qiubei and the others believed that he was being decadent. That pale face was like a perfect example of someone wallowing in self-misery. After returning home from school, Zhou Wen drew the curtains. Only then did he summon the mutated Vigor Ant in his living room. The symbol on the back of his hand burst out in a resplendent sanguine light. The symbol's blood color seemed to come to life as it turned into a stream of blood that flowed over his palm and soon enveloped it within, turning it into a boxing glove that was neither gold or jade. On the back of the boxing glove was the symbol of a Vigor Ant. Zhou Wen looked at the boxing glove on his left hand. He felt an explosive force fill his left fist as though he could blast apart a tank if he threw it out. Indeed, it's just like the live streams on the internet. Companion beasts provide an augmentation effect in a companion state. A Vigor Ant augments strength, right? Unable to test the augmented effects of the boxing glove at home, Zhou Wen could only put it away and switch to summoning the mutated Vigor Ant. As the mutated Vigor Ant symbol on the back of his hand shimmered, a strange blood-colored projection appeared in front of him. The projection gradually materialized, turning into a blood-colored ant the size of a racehorse. A mutated Vigor Ant in real life was in no way as adorable as the cartoon version in-game. Its blood-red carapace appeared to be cast from metal. Its physical contours seemed to contain infinite explosive strength. Its long, slender ant legs were like saws. The feelers on its head looked like resilient steel pieces. Ignoring being pierced by its leg, just being slammed by its body would probably result in fractures and debilitation. It left a strong impact on him when he observed it up close. It had a dangerous beauty that looked somewhat demonic. While it left one shuddering in fear, it also prompted one to subdue it. The game's depiction really can't be counted on. Such a ferocious killing machine actually looks so cute in-game. Zhou Wen swung himself onto the back of the mutated Vigor Ant and made it circle the living room. Unfortunately, the living room was too small, making it difficult for the mutated Vigor Ant to turn around. He didn't experience much of a thrill as a result. "I'll try writing you out when I next have a chance." Unless necessary, Zhou Wen didn't plan on letting others know of the existence of the mutated Vigor Ant. Although mortal stage companion beasts were rare, they were much weaker than legendary stage companion beasts. It was pointless showing it off. However, the dropping of the companion egg made Zhou Wen more diligent. He continued striving hard with the phone, hoping to see what other drops he could get from the ant nest. With the college entrance exams approaching, Zhou Wen went into school earlier, hoping to sleep in class. The moment he reached the school's entrance, he saw Tian Xingdong standing there with an odd expression. Seeing Zhou Wen walk over, Tian Xingdong hurriedly came forward, wearing an odd look on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, "Zhou Wen, I'm sorry. My friend invited me to join his team. I can't be in the same team as you. With that said, Tian Xingdong didn't wait for him to say another word before running off. Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback, unsure what was wrong with the fellow. The test was about to begin, yet here he was switching teams. I wonder if Fang Ruoxi has any backup plans for Tian Xingdong quitting the team. It's not easy to find another teammate this late. Zhou Wen walked into the school as he thought about the matter only to find Li Zi standing in front of him. Li Zi, do you know about Tian Xingdong quitting the team? Zhou Wen asked. Li Zi was taken aback before he looked at him with an odd expression. I'm sorry. For some reason, I can't take the combat test with you either. Zhou Wen looked at Li Zi and felt an ominous feeling rise in him. Why? Zhou Wen looked at Li Zi and asked. Don't ask. It's my bad. Li Zi wore a look of guilt and bowed before quickly walking away. When Zhou Wen saw Fang Ruoxi, he could tell from the look on her face what she was about to say. I'm sorry, Zhou Wen. I can't take the combat test with you. Fang Ruoxi came in front of him and remained silent for a long while before speaking. Article 12 of 1597. Why? Zhou Wen stared into Fang Ruoxi's eyes and asked. Fang Ruoxi's gaze dodged his, unwilling for their eyes to meet. She shook her head slightly and said, don't ask. In short, it's my fault. Zhou Wen smiled and reached out to press onto Fang Ruoxi's head. He ruffled her hair and said, I should be the one apologizing. Someone is out to get me, thus putting you, Tian Xingdong, and Li Zi in a difficult position. Now that there's still time, get another teammate. Make sure to do well, or I'll feel uneasy. Also, help me apologize to Tian Xingdong and Li Zi. Fang Ruoxi stared at Zhou Wen blankly. Her face wore a complicated expression. It was a lost, guilty, confused look with a hint of abnormality. All right, move along. I need to work hard as well. Zhou Wen retracted his palm as he left with a smile. Fang Ruoxi stood there watching his back, and after he had walked quite a distance away, she said with her body trembling, Zhou Wen, I've no idea who you offended, but that person wields great power. You have to be careful. Zhou Wen didn't say a word. All he did was turn his head and smile at her before briskly walking away. Zhou Wen knew that he didn't have much time left. Li Zi's family was ordinary, but Tian Xingdong belonged to one of the most powerful families in Guide City. Furthermore, Fang Ruoxi's family was even better. Rumor had it that her father was a high official in the city and someone with plenty of power. Someone who had the ability to influence. All three must wield extraordinary power. Zhou Wen couldn't figure out who he could have offended, but connecting it to Jing's transferring to fight him had clues left behind. Coming to a spot devoid of anyone else, Zhou Wen took out his phone, thinking of asking his father if he had offended anyone. However, there was only the voice message that the phone was not in service. He didn't know what Zhou Lingfeng was up to for him to not even switch on his phone in the day. After hanging up, Zhou Wen contemplated his subsequent plans. The most important goal now is to find 3 students who are willing to join me in the combat test. Zhou Wen frowned in thought. The combat test was different from the other subjects in the college entrance exam. As it was held in the dimensional zone, and although humans had already obtained control over the dimensional zones, reducing the dangers involved, there were still a number of casualties from the yearly test. Therefore, the combat test needed to be voluntary and the team formed freely. Zhou Wen didn't know what method of testing the League government would choose for the test. Every year, the result of casualties would result in a massive debate, but the combat test still continued every year. There weren't any signs of the League changing the situation. Zhou Wen didn't mind danger. With his present strength, even if he were to join the combat test alone, he was still bound to receive stellar results. However, it was a rule by the League government. It required 4 students from the same school to participate. Therefore, before the application deadline, he needed to find 3 students who were willing to form a team with him. I'm still a few days away from the college entrance exam. The students who are willing to take the combat test probably already have their own teams. How am I to find people to form a team? Zhou Wen was rather vexed. In the beginning, all he wanted was to apply to a reputable school and find a stable job. Then, he could game in peace, but someone didn't seem willing to give him his peace. They were bent on messing things up. Zhou Wen, follow me. Just as Zhou Wen reached the classroom, Yu Qubei called out to him. He had a nasty expression as he took Zhou Wen back to his office. After closing the door, he looked at him and with a grave expression asked, Zhou Wen, do you know Overseer N? Who is he? Zhou Wen asked blankly. Overseer N is an honorific title that also includes his rank. His real name is N Tianzuo. Do you really not know him? Yu Qubei asked Zhou Wen again with glaring eyes. No. Zhou Wen shook his head firmly. Noticing that Zhou Wen didn't seem to be hiding anything, Yu Qubei revealed a look of puzzlement. That's strange. If you do not know Overseer N, why did he criticize a high schooler like you when he came to inspect Guide City? What kind of background does N Tianzuo have? Zhou Wen got a rough idea about the reason Fang Rui and the rest had quit the team. It was likely to do with N Tianzuo. Yu Qubei wore a bitter smile. I'm only a teacher. I have no chance of coming close to a figure like that. I've only heard the principal mention a person like that. Earth's League is split into 4 districts: North, South, East, and West, and Guide City is just a tiny city in East District. Although Overseer in Tianzuo is young, he comes from an illustrious family. In his 20s, he enjoys a high rank and is a high official in the East District's military. He wields plenty of power and is an impressive figure. Sir, are you implying that in Tianzuo is targeting me? Zhou Wen asked with a frown. Perhaps not, but he said one sentence criticizing you. However, the people who are trying to be cozy with him are free to think and do many things, Yu Qubei said helplessly. As a high official, doesn't he know that a mere sentence is enough to destroy the future of a high schooler? Zhou Wen said coldly. Could this overseer and be related to In Jing? From the looks of it, probably. As for what the exact relationship is, I've no idea either. Yu Qubei thought for a moment and said, we can figure this out later. It's imperative we find you a team to participate in the combat test. The day after tomorrow is the deadline. We don't have time to spare. Zhou Wen said helplessly, at this point in time, the students who are willing to take the combat test already have their teams. How am I to find others? Besides, even if I found one, can't the dismantling of my team happen a second time? Therefore, the teammates you will be finding this time must not be ordinary students. Yu Qubei appeared to already have a plan. Not ordinary students. Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback, confused as to what Yu Qubei was getting at. Yu Qubei pondered for a moment and said, the combat test requires 4 students to freely form a team. This rule has a huge loophole, but the league has insisted on keeping it without changing it for decades. Under such rules, many students who aren't too strong but have extremely powerful teammates have obtained results that don't match their ability. After a pause, Yu Qubei continued, our school has a student named Li Xuan. If you are willing to form a team with him, and as long as he's willing, I doubt anyone will make it difficult for you. However, you have to ensure that he receives good results in exchange. Furthermore, he needs to be the one doing the best on the team. Are you telling me I'll be carrying Li Xuan? Zhou Wen wasn't a fool, so he naturally understood what Yu Qubei was getting at. Under normal circumstances, you naturally wouldn't have to do so. But in the present circumstances, although you won't get first in the team, you will still receive quite remarkable results. You just won't be first. This will be much better than not being able to participate at all. Zhou Wen wasn't a stubborn person. Without any hesitation, he said, Sir, I'll be troubling you to help me then. However, does our school really have a student named Li Xuan? If Guide High School really had a student with such a striking background, there was no reason for him not to know. Although Li Xuan is a student at our school, he has never come to school except on matriculation day. It's normal that you don't know him. Even amongst the teachers, few of them know of him, Yu Qubei said with a smile. In short, let's get over this obstacle first. You can leave any considerations to the future. Article 13 of 1597. After leaving Yu Qubei's office, Zhou Wen took out his phone and tried to call his dad, Zhou Lingfeng. No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible for him to offend a figure like In Tianzuo. For In Tianzuo to know him, a high schooler from a tiny city, and then criticize him by name was truly inexplicable. This time, the phone call connected as Zhou Lingfeng's voice sounded. Son, missing daddy so soon. Zhou Wen was already used to Zhou Lingfeng's character. Unmoved, he directly asked, Dad, do you know a person named In Tianzuo? Tianzuo. Of course. Upon saying that, Zhou Lingfeng exclaimed in surprise. Hey, how do you know that Tianzuo is your elder brother? I don't think I've introduced the two of you. My elder brother. Zhou Wen was left somewhat stunned. That's right. Tianzuo is Little Lan's son. I married Little Lan, so he's naturally your stepbrother. By the way, you also have a stepsister named In Jing. He had slipped effortlessly into addressing his fiancée by an affectionate diminutive. Zhou Wen didn't manage to hear the rest of what Zhou Lingfeng had to say. It was because he was so shocked. The development had exceeded his imagination. Zhou Lingfeng had actually married such a woman. Dad, how's your relationship with In Tianzuo? Zhou Wen tried probing. Great. Tianzuo and Little Jing honor me greatly. We have a very good relationship, Zhou Lingfeng answered without much thought. Zhou Wen understood his father's character. It was unlikely that he was lying. However, he couldn't help but feel bitter deep down. If In Tianzuo and In Jing really have a good relationship with Zhou Lingfeng, why would they be treating me this way? Could it be that they aren't agreeable to Dad's marriage with Ouyang Lan? Zhou Wen could sense Zhou Lingfeng's good mood and how happy he was about his impending wedding. He didn't wish to affect Zhou Lingfeng's wedding because of his matters, much less be a burden on him. If In Tianzuo and In Jing had treated him that way because they didn't want Zhou Lingfeng to marry Ouyang Lan, he didn't want his problems to affect Zhou Lingfeng's wedding. Otherwise, he would fall into their plans. Although he hadn't met In Tianzuo before, nor did he know what motives In Tianzuo had, Zhou Wen had a terrible impression of him. Regardless of how powerful the In family is, it has nothing to do with me. I have no plans on benefiting myself through the In family. This family is really going too far. Although Zhou Wen now knew the underlying reasons, it was meaningless. It wasn't as if he could tell others that In Tianzuo was pissed off because his dad had hit on her mom, thus also making him a sore sight to In Tianzuo, right? Not only couldn't he say it, but even if he said it out loud, it wasn't going to change the situation he was in. and Jing was able to defeat me with one strike. And Tianzuo's one sentence nearly made me lose the qualification to take the combat test. At the end of the day, it's because I'm too weak. I can only be bullied when I lack strength. If I were an epic stage expert, would they dare do this to me? Zhou Wen wasn't someone to bemoan his fate. He quickly put the matter aside and focused on grinding on the mysterious phone. Guide High School's former principal once commended Zhou Wen for being the most focused person he had ever met. Focused sounded like a very ordinary commendation, but to truly be focused was an insurmountable feat. Humans weren't saints. They had all kinds of desires and emotions that made them prone to enticement and disturbance. Even gods were no exception. Buddha suffered the temptation of Mara the demon, so what chance did mere mortals have? Many people claim studying to be difficult, but that was because they were unable to fully focus on their studies, nor did they have the ability to maintain that focused state. However, Zhou Wen was different. No matter what he did or no matter what the environment was, it was very easy for him to enter a focused state as he put 100% into it. It was very difficult for him to be influenced by external factors, thus, the reason the former principal had made such a remark about Zhou Wen. In-game, Zhou Wen summoned his companion beast, the mutated vigor ant. Although it also had 9 for constitution, this fellow's carapace was hard and its defense was much stronger than Zhou Wen. The blood-colored avatar rode on the mutated vigor ant, storming through the ant nest. Even a horde of vigor ants besieging him was no longer a worry. When the mutated vigor ant struck with its front pincers, it killed ordinary vigor ants with one strike. With its hard carapace, it remained invincible amongst the hordes. If only I had a spear. Zhou Wen discovered that by riding on the mutated vigor ant's back, the blood-colored avatar could hardly hit the vigor ants around it due to the distance. It had to jump off the mutated vigor ant's back and fight alongside it. Ever since he had obtained the mysterious crystal, Zhou Wen had never had such a good time grinding. The man and ant basically wiped out everything in their path as they stormed through the map. Whenever they met mutated vigor ants, they could quickly kill them with their combined forces. In the past, Zhou Wen was only able to grind in the opening area, dying before he could reach deeper. Now he was able to storm all the way in, quickly allowing him to enter areas he had never entered before. With so many vigor ants killed, 2-dimensional crystals dropped, but they were of very low values. Zhou Wen only replenished some of his energy after absorbing them. Ding! After killing another mutated vigor ant, Zhou Wen heard a familiar sound. On careful look, he was delighted. This time, it was a dimensional crystal, a vigor ant crystal at rank 9. Zhou Wen got the blood-colored avatar to pick it up, instantly feeling a jolt of electricity surge into his body as it blasted through his circulation. His Vigor Divine Fist instantly rose from rank 7 to rank 9. His Vigor Divine Fist might raise once again at rank 9. However, the amount of primordial energy drained increased as well. Each usage expended 5 primordial energy. With only 9 primordial energy points, he was unable to use Vigor Divine Fist twice in short periods of time. With this new addition, Zhou Wen lost himself to grinding. The man and ant slaughtered through the ant nest, leaving a wake of destruction as they forged deep into the nest. The ant nest was like a huge underground maze. After nearly 2 hours of killing, he finally saw its end. The cave ahead seemed to become broader as the passageway became wide as though he was entering a large warehouse. As he was storming through the horde of ants, he suddenly saw a silver glimmer of light. All Zhou Wen saw was a strange ant with silver wings sweep above the blood-colored avatar, and the next second, the latter's head flew into midair. The game screen then went black. Article 14 of 1597. A silver ant that can fly. Could it be a legendary stage-dimensional creature? Zhou Wen thought. He had planned on reviving the blood-colored avatar and heading for the area where the silver-flying ant had appeared, but with noon almost approaching, Zhou Wen could only put it on hold. Although Yu Qubei had tacitly allowed him to skip classes, he had arranged for Zhou Wen and Li Xuan to meet at noon. Therefore, Zhou Wen needed to make the trip. Zhou Wen originally imagined that they would meet in school, but to his surprise, Yu Qubei drove Zhou Wen out of school after morning classes and arrived at a private club east of the city. Li Xuan is quite someone with an ostentatious character, but he's not a bad person. You are only here for the test, so don't take anything else to heart. Before entering the club, Yu Qubei exhorted Zhou Wen with deep underlying tones. Sir, don't worry. I know what I should do, Zhou Wen said with a nod. Although Zhou Wen was already mentally prepared, he was still somewhat surprised when he saw Li Xuan inside a luxurious private room. A teenager who looked about 16 was sitting on a huge sofa. His shirt was untidy and frivolous, and around him were beauties. Lao Yu, come and have a drink. The teenager raised his glass of alcohol when he saw Yu Qubei, slipping effortlessly into addressing him by an affectionate diminutive. There's no need for that. I still have classes this afternoon. Yu Qubei seemed accustomed to this. As though not noticing the sexy ladies, he pointed to Zhou Wen and introduced, Li Xuan, this is the Zhou Wen I mentioned before. He's very capable and should be of some help for your test. Lao Yu, don't worry. On your account, I'll let him join me. Getting a pretty good result won't be a problem. Li Xuan downed his alcohol and said indifferently. Hearing you say that puts me at ease. I still have lessons, so I'll be heading back to school. Have a discussion with Zhou Wen about the combat test, Yu Qubei said. Lao Yu, are you really not going to have any drinks? The alcohol and women here are really good. Li Xuan said with a chuckle. Thanks for the offer. I still have classes, so I'll be heading back. Yu Qubei waved his hand and said to Zhou Wen, leave the application to me. Stay here for the next few days to familiarize yourself with Li Xuan and the rest. It will be good for you during the combat test. Thank you, sir. Zhou Wen was rather moved. Yu Qubei had no ties with him, yet he was helping him at the risk of offending in Tianzuo. It left him feeling very grateful. By getting into a reputable school and having a decent future is a way to not let me and the former principal down. Yu Qubei patted Zhou Wen on the shoulder and said with a smile, all right, I'll be heading back. Have a good discussion with Li Xuan about the details. After Yu Qubei left, Zhou Wen looked at Li Xuan who was reveling amidst the embraces of the beauties. He asked, do we get the other two teammates here and do some teamwork training before the test begins? Li Xuan narrowed his eyes and said to Zhou Wen, right? I've heard of you, the #1 genius in Guide High School. Just some random rumors. Don't treat it seriously, Zhou Wen said. That's right. In a small city like Guide City, how can there be a real genius? If you were really a genius, you wouldn't have been defeated by An Jing's single strike, Li Xuan said languidly. There's no need for any teamwork practice. I'm allowing you to join my team solely because of Lao Yu. When the time comes, make sure you follow obediently behind us and not give us trouble. That works, Zhou Wen said, unfazed. Do you drink? If you can finish this bottle, I'll let you choose from them. Li Xuan placed a bottle of alcohol in front of Zhou Wen. I don't drink. Zhou Wen shook his head. Up to you. Li Xuan found Zhou Wen boring and ignored him as he began having fun himself. Zhou Wen found a corner to sit down and began gaming on his phone, continuing his grinding fest. He wasn't interested in staying here, but since Yu Qubei had requested he stay behind, he didn't think it was right to leave. Therefore, he just stayed behind to game. Seeing Zhou Wen sitting motionless in the corner gaming, Li Xuan had a feeling of contempt for him. To wallow in self-misery just because of a little setback. For this good-for-nothing, Lao Yu had to beg me. It wasn't worth it. Suddenly, Li Xuan's heart stirred. He whispered to a sexy girl beside him. You're naughty. The girl jokingly snapped back as she walked towards Zhou Wen with her hips swaying. Zhou Wen was busy grinding, eager to rush back to where the silver-winged flying ant was. He wanted to know what level the dimensional creature was. Just as he was getting into it, he suddenly felt a softness touching his arm. Then, a sweet voice rang in his ear. Hey handsome, what's this game? Is it fun? Yes. Zhou Wen continued grinding without looking up. After all, even if they saw the game, the cartoon-styled ants and the interface made it difficult for one to connect it to the dangerous dimensional zones. Besides, Zhou Wen had never heard of a dimensional zone that was an ant nest. When the girl saw Zhou Wen ignoring her, she subconsciously bit her lip. Then, she reached out to caress his cheek. She slightly used some force as she turned Zhou Wen's head towards her as she leaned into his ear and breathed out. What's so fun about the game? Why not play a game with me? As Li Xuan drank, he watched Zhou Wen's reaction with piqued interest. He thought to himself, Zhou Wen is such a gaming addict. He probably has never touched a woman's body, much less a woman as coquettish as Zioa. Will he end up with a nosebleed as a result? Zioa had only thought of turning Zhou Wen's face slightly. Under such situations, men would automatically look at her, but despite doing so, Zhou Wen's face was unmovable like a rock. His eyes were still peeled to the phone screen. A little peeved, Zioa exerted some strength and forcibly turned Zhou Wen's head. As she used too much strength, Zhou Wen's cheeks were a little deformed from the squishing. Zhou Wen was grinding and was unwilling to be unfocused. The blood-colored avatar was amidst a horde of vigor ants, so any moment of distraction led to possible death, the loss of one drop of blood. Over the past month, Zhou Wen had been using his blood to game. With so much blood being expended, he was beginning to suffer from anemia, therefore, he didn't even wish to lose one drop. Although Zhou Wen was facing her because of her twisting, Zioa realized that his eyes were still diagonally peeled to his phone screen. Enraged, she reached out her other hand and held his face with both hands. She turned his head even more, making Zhou Wen have no choice but to look at her. Then, she revealed a mesmerizing smile and said sweetly, stop gaming. Let's have some drinks, all right. Article 15 of 1597. When Zhou Wen's gaze was forced away from the phone screen, he immediately frowned. He had just seen a mutated vigor ant rush over, and if he didn't control his blood-colored avatar to take on the battle, it could easily lead to a game over. Without having the luxury of time to think, Zhou Wen only wished to shift his gaze back to his phone. He instantly extended his hand and pressed it against Xiao's face. With a slight nudge, he said, don't disturb my gaming. Zhou Wen didn't use much of his strength, but he had forgotten how substantially his strength had increased recently. Zioa hadn't cultivated at all, so her physical constitution was inferior to even the typical high schooler. This casual push ended up pushing Zioa entirely backward as she plopped to the ground. PFFT. Upon seeing Zhou Wen pushing Zioa to the ground with a look of contempt, Li Xuan spewed out a mouthful of alcohol as he choked and coughed. The room instantly fell silent as the 8 sexy girls looked at Zhou Wen as though he was a monster. Zioa was half slumped on the ground as she wore a look of disbelief. She next felt aggrieved and furious. As she got to her feet, she cursed, "Why resort to violence? Serves you right to be single." Zhou Wen was focused on killing the mutated vigor ant and hadn't noticed her rage. He ignored her and continued rapidly firing commands into his phone. Upon seeing Xiao's aggrieved look, Li Xuan was amused. This punk's quite interesting. Xiaoa was a headliner at this private club. Although her demeanor was inferior to the top escorts in the big cities, her figure was unparalleled. Even Li Xuan found Xiaoa excellent in everything other than her demeanor, speech and actions. She left him rather mesmerized. However, Zhou Wen's look of contempt when he pushed her amused him greatly. If it isn't because this punk is a naturally insensitive man, there's a high chance that he has gynophobia because of the beating he suffered under In Jing, a woman. Li Xuan thought without any ill intent. Zhou Wen sat there gaming the entire time. Li Xuan quickly lost his interest in him and began reveling in fun again. The entire club's top floor had been reserved by Li Xuan. There was everything one needed. Li Xuan's ignorance of Zhou Wen was something the latter enjoyed as well. He could keep grinding in game. After storming the ant nest for an hour, Zhou Wen once again arrived at the area he had previously spotted the silver-winged flying ant. Indeed, it had grown a pair of silver wings and its entire body was silver like the typical flying ant. It was extremely fast, and even though Zhou Wen was prepared, he wasn't able to last long against it. Soon, he had his chest impaled by the silver-winged flying ant as it flew across the sky. It was extremely fast and it was very agile in midair. It was able to change trajectory like a bat, causing Zhou Wen's vigor divine fist to be of no use against it. He couldn't hit it. Although the silver-winged flying ant is powerful, it's unlikely to have reached the legendary stage. Killing it isn't impossible, but I need to make careful plans. Zhou Wen thought. From his observations, the silver-winged flying ant's strength and constitution were not weaker than that of the mutated vigor ant. Furthermore, its speed was much faster than the mutated vigor ant. This was also why it was so difficult to beat. Rank 9 Vigor Divine Fist was likely capable of injuring the silver-winged flying ant, but without being able to touch it, no amount of strength mattered. Also, the ant horde's influence on Zhou Wen was significant. Although Zhou Wen and his mutated vigor ant weren't afraid of a huge group of vigor ants, it severely restricted his freedom of movement, making him unable to dodge the silver-winged flying ant's attacks in the confined space. From the looks of it, to kill it, I need to deliver the attack at the moment it approaches. However, it's not easy to grasp the opportunity. Zhou Wen entered the game again, and as he stormed towards the area where the silver-winged flying ant resided, he considered how he could seize the opportunity to deliver a counterattack. After about an hour, Zhou Wen once again arrived in front of the silver-winged flying ant. At the instant the latter charged and appeared above the blood-colored avatar, Zhou Wen threw out Vigor Divine Fist in a bid to kill it. However, the silver-winged flying ant's body did a bizarre twist when it was less than half a feet from Zhou Wen's fist. While dodging the Vigor Divine Fist, its blade-like claws decapitated the blood-colored avatar from the back. Zhou Wen made repeated attempts, but all of them ended with failure. The silver-winged flying ant was just too nimble and his Vigor Divine Fist just couldn't touch it. The only time he hit the silver-winged flying ant was when he used Inch Punch. He threw out the punch when it was extremely close to him and had successfully hit it. However, Inch Punch wasn't augmented like a primordial energy skill. It wasn't too effective when hitting the silver-winged flying ant and failed to seriously damage it. If only Vigor Divine Fist can deliver strength just like Inch Punch. That way, I don't have to waste so much time swinging my arm. I'll then have the chance of releasing my strength instantaneously when it's in close proximity to kill it. Unfortunately, Vigor Divine Fist is an in-game technique. That's not right. The in-game character is no different from me. If I'm able to use Vigor Divine Fist like Inch Punch, I'll be able to deliver explosive strength at short distances. As such, my in-game character will also be able to do it. Realizing this, Zhou Wen put away his phone and began experimenting with how he could deliver Vigor Divine Fist using the principles of Inch Punch. Vigor Divine Fist was a very open and showy move, a primordial energy skill that delivered a critical strike. When delivering it, he had to make some huge retracting moves, somewhat different from Inch Punch. Clearly, to modify Vigor Divine Fist's delivery to be similar to Inch Punch's was very difficult. Zhou Wen made repeated attempts, and although it was very difficult, he wasn't willing to give up. Li Xuan woke up from his nap and saw Zhou Wen throwing out punches again and again in the corner as if he was practicing punching. He didn't pay much notice at first, imagining that Zhou Wen was tired from gaming and was simply stretching his body. However, when he realized Zhou Wen was still punching 2 hours later, he couldn't help but observe. This is Inch Punch. But the way strength is delivered and the magnitude of the movement is too much. It's terrible. Li Xuan lost interest after watching for a moment. Zhou Wen's punches weren't anything worth watching. 2 days before the college entrance exams, Zhou Wen kept trying to fuse the Vigor Divine Fist and Inch Punch together. He had a brief inkling of what was needed but was unable to fully master it. Time quickly passed and the college entrance exams began. The first 3 days were ordinary high school subjects. After Yu Qubei came with their candidate passes, Zhou Wen and Li Xuan headed for their exam centers separately and completed their own examinations. On the 4th day, Zhou Wen came to the combat test venue and met up with Li Xuan. The combat test was held in a dimensional zone. As every dimensional zone was different, there were some differences in the combat test across districts. Guide City's combat test was held in Guide Ancient City. In the dimensional storms decades ago, a dimensional rift opened, turning the area into a dimensional zone.